who has the real influence right now. Some big outlets like the BBC, like the Daily Mail, all sorts of different types of legacy outlets, or a YouTuber with 1 million followers who has more influence.
I think the BBC have got they've got the monopoly on taxpayers' money and sex crime, but I'm not sure that you wanted either of those, did you? Look, on a serious note, I think that it's perfectly legitimate for mainstream media to try and find a reason to exist. They're there for their shareholders, and that's their right to do that. But I think in a changing market, you've got to be much more lean. And I genuinely believe that it's the new players in the market who are going to be the biggest. I genuinely believe the world's biggest media outlet will be an English-speaking media outlet, and I believe it will be a conservative media outlet founded in Britain. And I think it's either not been founded or has less than 5 staff as we sit here today, because I just think that's the direction of travel. When you look at the businesses that are represented here, you know, no matter how more or less profitable we are, we're lean enough to not have to, you know, go to our shareholders year after year, to go to banks year after year, to be bailed out. And fundamentally, whether you like it or not, in a capitalist market, being able to pay the bills is absolutely vital. BBC can't do that. And I don't want to be cruel to some of the other outlets that I work for, but they can't pay either.
Well, I think that we aren't winning yet, if I'm going to be totally honest. And I think there's a huge amount of fight left required. Obviously, if you look at what happened in the US with the Trump election, it was a turning point. But there is so much in the United Kingdom, which is obviously what we're talking about today, where the mainstream media has an institutional bias. I was just reading last week, the off-communists, you know, they're my enemies, they now want to manipulate the YouTube algorithm. That is the level that we're getting to in terms of the attempts by the establishment and the deep state to stop an independent media revolution. What this would mean is that content from the British Bashing Corporation, Woke ITV, Channel 4 and Channel 5, because they are officially the public service broadcasters in this country, would have priority over content from Andre Walker, Outspoken, Tousi TV. It is utterly disgusting and manipulative. I think it shows they know that they are going to lose, but at this point, I think they are winning, and that's why I talk about them so much. And one of the weirdest things for me since leaving GB News is GB News has decided to have a truce with the mainstream media. So after I left, they no longer, I mean, in fact, they have banned people from describing Sky News as Sly News. It's like, oh, we want to be part of the mainstream. And I think that's a huge mistake, because I think they need to be challenged every single day. By the way, I watch the BBC and ITV main news bulletins every single night, because it's so important for me to see how they view Britain, how they view the world when I'm covering my show. And I promise you, this is no exaggeration, for the past 2 weeks, Woke ITV and their awful news bulletin, which is edited by Tom Bradby, has spent the first 15 or 16 minutes every single night on a combination of Gaza and Jeffrey Epstein. Look at what is going on up and down this country. They are disgusting. They are liars. They are bad actors. But right now, they still do have influence, and they've got a government, and they've got a regulator that wants to protect them. So that's why I believe this fight is so important.
I'll tell you something, Dan. It's really... I must admit, what you've just said there, I watched Tom Bradby on 2 occasions. But they seem to have these monologues about how evil Israel is, and they go on for a long period of time. But I didn't know anything about the algorithm thing, so thanks for warning me. But we already have a good example, don't we, with this situation with press passes, where they say you're not a proper journalist unless you've got a press pass, and then they say there's no route for us to get press passes. And so it's just a way of that cartel maintaining their own power. It's exactly the same as the press gallery in the House of Commons, who have kept us out pretty consistently for a significant amount of time. And it does worry me, because it is, and Dan's right, it is in this business, they are well up for using their power and using the vested interest to kick out new players in the market. And if they can manipulate the algorithm through Ofcom, that is precisely what will happen. And we may be in the position where we have to offshore and move to the United States of America, which might not be a bad thing, actually. Florida's quite nice this time of year.
Well, it's so nice.
Benjamin.
Yeah, exactly.
Here we go. Come on. Come
had
on,
all the
brace
hits.
I
yourselves.
have been waiting for this moment for such a long time.
Brace yourselves. Brace yourselves.
And I'm not holding back.
I'm glad to be back on a superstar panel with you. Dan dubbed me the wokest man in Britain, which I was furious about. No, I said, how dare you assume my gender?
It's as great
Quite
as
good,
it
that,
is.
actually.
It's as good as it gets.
He's done
don't
all
get
right
your
there.
hopes up. Look, so I think reports of the death of the mainstream media are heavily exaggerated. Because if you actually look at the profit margins and the readership of some outlets, the New York Times, the Spectator, the New Statesman, the Economist, they're at record highs. And so I think what you're seeing is a sort of divergence in what people expect. Traditional media, for example, the Telegraph made a profit for the first time a couple of years ago. The Guardian had 1 year where it made a profit. Hadn't done that in decades. And so the idea that those are dying, that they don't have an audience, is simply false.
Yeah, but hang on a second. You're citing as an example one newspaper making a profit in 1 year out of 40.
But
I mean, if that was McDonald's, they'd shut the place down.
But the other titles I mentioned are having record profits and record readership. I think the truth is, one of the problems that mainstream media has had is that too few people were the gatekeepers to what makes a story and the types of opinions you get. And so you see that all over the place. I can think of stories that I've pitched whereby they don't get published because someone's friends with someone, despite it being a great story. And in a newspaper setting or a traditional TV channel, well, that's that. There's no way around it. And so I do think there was a blockage of information on topics, and that's why you've got the sort of desire for things like
Well,
dance.
of course, because let me ask you a question. Why, you're a contributor to GB News,
Yes,
right?
and other channels. I've just come from Sky News.
Oh, God. Well, no one saw that, trust me. Why, but GB News, I mean, look, a lot of people in this room...
I don't think he likes GB News, you know.
A lot of people in this room cheered for GB News this morning. Obviously, it's a very conflicted thing for me. I helped launch that channel. I was the launch presenter, and I really believed it could be something great. But look at what you've just said. Why does GB News, to this day, maintain a ban on interviewing Tommy Robinson when they interview... hard left Islamists, when they interview anti-white racists every single day? It is disgusting. How can you justify it?
Well, it's not for me to justify or
Well,
to
you work
condemn.
there.
I do work there, but I'm not the person
You
that
take the
decides.
pay. Well, is it right?
I'm not the person.
Is it
that decides.
right?
Well, look, I don't agree with Tommy Robinson, and I think he has some
But
dangerous
okay, so you
ideas.
don't agree with him, so he should be banned.
But I think
I'm not asking whether you agree with Tommy Robinson. I don't agree with Bushra Sheikh or Narinder Kaur, who I think are two of the most racist people in this country.
Channel. So actually, that's a bad example. Because
Well, they weren't when I was there.
But you give that example. Narinder Kaur is not on, she's tweeted this herself many times, is banned from that channel. And as far as I'm aware, Tommy Robinson is not welcome on the channel. And I think actually...
Why?
Well, you'd have to ask the bosses there. I'm not on that much money, trust me.
But is it right? I'm asking for your opinion. Or are you one of these
I
people
think it's
who are
right.
too scared to criticize TV News? Because let's be honest, most people are. They want to take the coin, so they accept the censorship while secretly DMing Tommy Robinson behind the scenes.
Look, the only DMs I've exchanged with Tommy Robinson are him saying he'll sue me. So there's no secret DMs beyond that. Look, I don't think he should be on there. And actually...
Why?
I would make...
Why?
I
Because you disagree with him.
No, but I think he's a dangerous person. And I would make the point...
No, seriously,
Free
Benjamin.
speech, get over it.
Benjamin, you have to justify that.
Speak on
You
time,
have to
please.
justify that. You have said he is a dangerous person. How? Justify it.
Well, I think he sometimes stirs up racial hatred, and I think he has a loose relationship with the truth. And so the thing is that when you have... Here's the other point I was going to get to about new media versus legacy media is that sometimes when you have people that are just on, not you actually, and I watch your channel, but sometimes you have people on YouTube or on their TikTok, there's a very loose relationship to the truth. There's not much fact checking. I think sometimes Tommy Robinson is guilty of that, and that's where new media falls down.
Okay, but Danielle, can I just say one thing about that?
One final thought.
Because seriously, when you think about that for 1 second, that is one of the most chilling things someone in the mainstream media can say. No group of people in this country have been more guilty for lying to the British people for the past 5 years in the most despicable manner. Pakistani Muslim rape gang cover-up over the COVID vaccines, cover up over Tommy Robinson, cover up over the lockdowns, cover up over Brexit. They lied.
No.
The mainstream media lied. This idea that, oh, it's just the terrible YouTubers that lie. No. If we were talking about people lying in the mainstream media, locking people up for that, then Laura Kuenssberg, Robert Peston, Beth Rigby, Benjamin Butterworth would all be in jail.
Well, I tell you what, you were only too keen to take the money when they were offering it. So, I think it says more about the fact that you just couldn't keep the job.
No. I think you really have to look at why I was sacked, actually, if you think that I was someone who took the money and did what producers said. And actually, having worked with me there, Benjamin, for the first 3 years, be honest about it. The whole reason I was sacked is because I wouldn't be told what to do. Just be honest about that. You were in that studio with me. No. He was in that studio with me. Seriously, I want you to tell the truth because you've just claimed that I am some type of shill who took mainstream media money. You worked with Benjamin. You worked with me there for 3 years. Was I someone that did what I was told?
Look, I thoroughly enjoyed working on your program, and I've never said otherwise.
No, I know. I know, but just answer the question. Was I someone... No, you saw the fights I had with the producers behind the scenes when they tried to tell me what to do.
Yeah, but you didn't quit over that, did you?
No, I was sacked.
Exactly.
Because I didn't do what I was told to do in my earpiece.
But you know what?
Okay, guys, right, I'm just gonna...
No, I thought I was quite enjoying that. Just let him...
Thank you for that, babe.
Can I just make one point?
I think we should just move on to the next question because you actually mentioned a really good point about fact-checking. And I think one of the main concerns that a lot of people who support the legacy media have is that with new media, who is there to fact-check? How do you define credibility? How do you know which channels are credible and which aren't? And what standards should new media be held to? Does free speech include incorrect things?
Do you want to go first? So I think that one of the problems is that online, misinformation, whether intentional or through laziness, is something that goes viral and makes more money faster sometimes than the truth. But I want to make one point, which is that you talk about the grooming gangs, which is an appalling stain on this country, but that was revealed by a journalist in the Times newspaper in 2010. The only reason, that's just true, the only reason that we can all do this is because of mainstream media.
No,
and
look,
I think that's an example of the reason.
I don't want to be rude, and I'm not endorsing this man at all. But unfortunately, whether you like it or not, the grooming gangs were exposed by Nick Griffin and the attempt to lock him up for it. Now, you like that or you don't, but he'd been banging on about it for 20 years before the Times said anything at all.
Well, my view on the Pakistani Muslim rape gangs is that it was very, very clear that the cover-up was absolutely perpetrated by the mainstream media working with the Westminster establishment. Now, do I give credit to Andrew Norfolk? Yes. Rest in peace as well. Obviously, there are incredible individual journalists. But if you look at a lot of what Andrew Norfolk said, it was that whole attitude of, well, we're doing this in this way to stop the horrible far right. That was how it was presented. And you know that there was really radio silence from the mainstream media.
Let me just say something. I can't remember when I first heard about the Pakistani rape gangs, but what I will say to you, and you can look this up because it is genuinely true, I worked at London City Hall in something like 2005. Forgive me for not knowing exactly when it was. And in that period, it is well documented that Lee Jasper, the Mayor of London's race advisor, told Ken Livingstone to use the financial muscle of the Greater London Authority to stop a television documentary going out about grooming gangs. If you lived in London in 2005, your taxpayers' money was the reason Channel 4 didn't broadcast a program about it. So shame on Lee Jasper, shame on Ken Livingstone. The reality is, everybody in power, everybody in the establishment, everybody in the media knew about it, and they ran for cover and desperately tried to protect their friends in the police,
yes,
who were trying to cover it up.
Yes.
And by the way,
just like they did with Jimmy Savile.
Just on that subject, I think we should create a new offence. You know how you can have this thing where there's a joint enterprise, where if I drive you to a bank robbery, I can be done for the bank robbery as well. I think if you cover up a grooming gang, you should be deemed part of it. So,
I suppose.
So as far as I'm concerned, lock up Sadiq Khan, lock up Sir Peter Fahey, lock up Keir Starmer, give them all the same prison sentence.
So, Dan and Andre, having, both of you have previously, you still work in the legacy media, Talker's legacy. You worked at GB. I would count GB as mainstream legacy media.
It is.
But to be fair, I work with James Whale at Talk TV. That's not exactly the pinnacle of...
But you also have your own YouTube channels, and so you're also part of the new media revolution.
Absolutely.
But who holds you accountable? Is it your viewers? Is it legacy media? Do they report when you're saying incorrect things if you were?
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think, one of the massive misnomers in the whole discussion about the mainstream media versus independent media. The idea that in some way, we're all out of control online with the ability to say whatever we want, and actually, it's the mainstream media who are patrolled. That is absolute rubbish. I will just repeat again, the misinformation, I mean, I actually hate that term. I don't use that term. I don't use the term conspiracy theory because every conspiracy theory over the past 10 years, pretty much, is now a fact. But the lies that have been put out there over the past 10 years largely have come from the legacy media. And so their obsession about trying to shut down the independent media, I think, is really disturbing.
But it's also a circular argument. And I made this point to John Whittingdale when they were talking about regulating. Look, the regulation of journalists comes through these professional standards bodies that they won't let us join. Well, they'd let me join because I'm on Talk TV, but they wouldn't let a YouTuber or a TikToker join. So they won't let them join the professional standards body and then complain they don't conform to professional standards. That is an obvious ruse, isn't it? To deny that they are professional people. There is no question that the professional standards that Dan Wootton has on his show are as good or better than the mainstream media. There's no doubt about that. The only people who dispute that
this week, someone in the independent media came for me a little bit. I'm not going to go into it, but he was like, I have an NTCJ, which is like the journalistic qualification. It's like, I do not give a fuck. Seriously. Who am I incredibly impressed by at the moment? The independent journalists who are standing outside those migrant hotels, very often at great risk to their personal safety. I want to shout some of them out. E Speaks Freely, Resistance GB, Jack Hadders, Eddie Alexander, Based and Bougie. Am I missing anyone? I'm sure I am, because there are so many of these people. Honestly, without them, outside the migrant hotels, we would not have seen any of what went on. We would not have seen the police escorting Antifa protests because they lied about it in Epping. We would have seen none of it. Because guess who do not have their cameras at these protests? The BBC, ITV, Sky News, pretty much GB News and Talk TV are relying on the independent journalists too.
Would you agree that the independent journalists have put pressure on, for example, GB News to go and do the work that they've been... Because to credit to them, GB News have done some really good work recently in exposing...
Yeah, but he's not going to say that, is he? He's not going to agree.
No. I am actually, Andre. I'm completely fair. I will always say when I think there are people at GB News who are doing good work, and I think there are some people at GB News who do great work. Bev Turner, Nana Acquare, Ben Leo.
Oh, yeah.
No,
Patrick
absolutely
Christmas.
not. well, don't even get me started on that one. But it is undeniable that it is only the pressure from the independent media that has made them realize, oh my goodness, we've got to get to Epi, and this is a big story.
But I think it's also worth pointing out the material they're producing is brilliant. So it's not just a lobbying exercise, it is quality journalism as well. And I think we do owe those people a debt of gratitude, and long may it continue.
Yes, but the idea that if you have a qualification, honestly, remember, I worked for 20 years in newspapers. I ended up as executive editor of The Sun. Like, the idea, oh, because you work at the Daily Mail. Did you see the police said to Tommy Robinson this week when they arrested him for 3 tweets, but I'm tweeting something literally that was tweeted by a Daily Mail journalist, and they said, oh yeah, but they're a protected species because they're... Honestly, I've worked with these people. All that it means if you have like an NTCJ qualification and work in the mainstream newspapers is that you have an editor pretty much telling you what to do. That editor is being told what to do by a proprietor who is usually a billionaire who has all of their own vested interests. I know what this is like. During lockdowns, by the end of 2020, and this was the reason really that I left The Sun and Talk TV, I haven't spoken much about this, but to go to GB News and the Mail, it was because I was coming under increased pressure, because initially I was told, because Rupert Murdoch was over in the UK because of COVID, right? So he was reading the papers every day, and initially I was told, no, he's loving this, keep going on the anti-lockdown stuff, keep going on it. By the end of the year, News UK, which was making a lot of money from the government, started saying to me, oh, Dan, we don't want these lockdown columns. You know, it's just upsetting a few too many people. We think Boris needs a chance. And I was just done at that point because, come on, there was only one story at the end of 2020. Like, what else was I meant to have written about? So the point that I'm making is that actually, just because you're a journalist working in a legacy media organization does not give you any extra relevance. All it means is that you're captured. And I'm not saying there are some of them who are really good, but trust me, they are captured because for 20 years I worked in this system and I understood there were limits to where you could go. And that's the same at GB News, by the way, which has 2 billionaires, and I used to have a lot to do with them, and those billionaires will set the agenda of what you can say, and that's not right.
There's obviously a bias in the fact that somebody who owns a newspaper is going to have a motivation for it because, in the main part, they're not profitable in this day and age. Indeed, I think The Sun lost 90 million the other year from various lawsuits.
Yeah.
So obviously there is a likely bias coming up. But when you get to people's YouTube channels or subscription services online, news outlets, you are beholden to a relatively small group of people. And if you have an opinion that doesn't go with those people paying your subscriptions, you can't afford to disagree, to argue with them. And don't you get into a situation where all people hear is an echo of what they thought in the first place?
There's one thing I do want to raise, and I don't work for GB News, so I've got no dog in the GB News hunt explicitly. And I know that you've been critical of them for not interviewing Tommy Robinson, which once again is not my business. I don't have anything to do with GB News. But I do think we have to think as a group of people about that advertising ban that was foisted upon GB News, an attempt to bankrupt the company by literally forcing each and every person or each and every company that normally advertises on television to make sure they didn't advertise with GB News. And whether you like GB News or not, we all have a vested interest in that strategy failing. And I think it's vital that GB News did defeat it, because I'll tell you, that trick would have been played on every single media outlet. Not that you don't use Vodafone, not that you don't use Kellogg's, not that you don't go to Unilever products or anything like that, but just bullying those brands out of advertising on GB News was so toxic, so radioactive, and so dangerous. And I do think the fact that we collectively defeated it is important,
but it wasn't
whatever
defeated.
You think of GB News.
But it wasn't defeated. It wasn't defeated.
Okay.
There is still a widespread advertising ban. A couple...
But they've survived, I suppose, is my point.
Yeah, but a couple of the majors... Eventually, I think M&S maybe gave in after about 3 years, but on the whole, there is still a widespread advertising ban on GB News. But unfortunately, what the result was that GB News in a lot of ways
Moderated.
capitulated, moderated their content, sacked lots of people, said no, we're part of the mainstream. So this idea, I just don't sign up to this idea that the only way...
Just a question to you, because I genuinely don't know the answer. Do you think GB News would interview Tommy Robinson if it wasn't for the advertising boycott?
It would make it easier, but I would say no, because, I mean, what you've got to remember is one of the people who owns GB News, one of the 50% owners, is the new owner of The Spectator, who recently made Michael Gove editor just after he had endorsed Kamala Harris to win the US presidential election.
I mean, he is a communist, isn't he? Let's be honest.
So this idea that, no, GB News is the answer. Look, I think GB News is now as bad as the mainstream. I guess what I would say in terms of Benjamin's point, though, is that it's completely untrue, because if you look at my coverage, for example, over the past year, I've actually taken a massive hit with who you might describe as my base for, unfortunately, having to call out a lot of the capitulation within Reform UK. And probably if you look at this audience here, I would say maybe half of this audience would say, Dan, you're crazy, Reform UK is the only answer. And then the other half, understanding where I'm at, which is that GB News, that Nigel Farage has done exactly what GB News did, which is capitulate to the establishment. But I've lost a lot of support for pointing that out. And I can't watch GB News now because it's literally like they are, for me, it's a litmus test. Like, are you prepared to call out Reform UK when they do something wrong? I mean, honestly, how can all of these presenters and commentators, people who I used to respect, right, sit there this week and try and defend Reform UK launching a policy of housing men in women's prison? And I've literally seen it. I mean, it's like it could have been written by you, this policy.
But it's not true, because they did criticise it. Patrick Christie's, you won't have been tuning in, but Patrick Christie's did an item on that, criticising it. So I don't think it's fair.
Well, I'm sorry. I have analysed a lot of the coverage on GB News over the past year. There is virtually no dissent when it comes to Reform UK. I know for a fact, by the way, because I have a lot of friends at GB News still, that Rupert Lowe was banned from the channel. There was a very senior, brilliant interviewer at GB News who wanted to do a big sit-down with him after his exit from Reform UK, and they would not do that. So, you know, it's what is true independence. Look, for me, it means I am not a shill for any political party.
But here's the big question in my mind. Will there be a point when Tousi TV is ITV, if you like, you know, with 500 members of staff and is the big business? I mean,
and we don't want to be that.
Well, no, one of the problems that we've got, let's be honest, is that Google, who are paying most of the bills through YouTube, like to keep people as sole traders. They don't call them media businesses, they call them content creators. And I think that makes it very difficult. What I personally would like to see in the fullness of time is the Tousis, is the Dan Wootons, is the Andre Walkers being the big media beasts that run the whole thing.
Yeah, but the thing
I think that's quite hard to get.
But this has happened in America, honestly, and this is why we need your support, okay? And that's why I value everyone in this room today, because you care about this. It has happened in America, and these people have not had to sell out. So my whole channel, and bless her, she was total rock for me during the worst period of my life when most people ran away, was Megyn Kelly, who I believe is now probably, I mean, I read a column this week that said Megyn Kelly is the new Rush Limbaugh. So she is now arguably the most important conservative voice in America. And it's because she is not 100% MAGA. She's not a never Trumper. She has this true independence.
But by staying as a sole trader, we deny the people outside this room the opportunity to hear the truth. And I think that is the difficult thing. Look,
because her numbers, no, but that's not true. Her numbers are now bigger. Her numbers on a monthly basis are bigger than, on YouTube this is, are bigger than CNN, MSNBC, CNBC, CBS.
Sorry to become the interviewer, but Do you believe that the future then is that these big institutions will fall, like ITV,
Yes.
the BBC,
Yes.
Sky, and what will come is effectively very small operations like ours will just
Yes.
expand their viewership?
100%. What Megyn Kelly's done, and I'm very inspired by this, is she's now launched something called the MK Network, where she's brought a few other people like Maureen Callahan and Link Lauren sort of under her umbrella. But no, this idea that, oh, we all have to start teaming up. Look, I want to help other people. On my show, constantly, I am putting on these new voices. I can see some of them in the room. Is that young Bob? Yes, young Bob. He's brilliant. He speaks freely. Like, that is my duty and my job to bring these incredible voices, not just young, by the way, because I'm not going to be rude, but I adore him. Mr. Howard
No, but
Cox
before-
at the back of the
We're gonna
room
go to
is another one.
questions.
I was going to say, before we go, can you just shout at Ben a bit more, please?
Yeah, so I did actually have one final question for Ben, and that was, can
Why?
you admit that due to the deplatforming of people like Rupert Lowe, like Tommy Robinson, that has helped to birth the rise of new media platforms? And then we're going to go to get some Q&As from you guys.
Well, I think what you're seeing is a splintering, and it's happening in all directions. You know, it's happening on the left just as it is on the right. But I think that is actually not just because of those individuals, but I think it's quite dangerous because you get people that just live in their own echo chambers that don't listen to each other and talk to each other. Now, there are lots of people in this room that would say, I hate the fact that we have this cancel culture, that people can't get along. But these kind of new media outlets are doing that.
Bullshit.
And there's one other point I'd make.
Who have we cancelled?
I think political
never been
debate
on.
is more alive now than it's been for decades in Britain. I don't know.
But there's also a dishonesty to this because it assumes that somehow you get all your stories and information in a vacuum. When actually, I watch your channel quite a lot because you.
Good, you need to learn a lot.
Because I love the sort of highbrow journalism you do about loose women. And
Okay.
all of that comes from
Look,
mainstream media.
I'm an unashamed populist. But all I would say is that on the right, we don't cancel in the same way on the left. So I will never forget when Novara Media, and they are my arch enemies, right? I despise them.
They didn't want to come today, by the way. We did ask.
But when Novara Media was demonetized by YouTube, I was the first to be publicly saying that is disgusting. They should not be deplatformed. Do you know what happened when I was cancelled? They all jumped on the bandwagon and said that I should never appear on mainstream British television again. So it's the left that cancels, not the right.
Great. Well, now, thank you so much to our panel, but now we're just going to ask you guys if you have any questions. And if you do, raise your hand, and I will come and bring the microphone to you.
And make them spicy. Come on.
I'll go to this guy over here.
It was like Challenge Annika.
Would you mind just introducing yourself and give your full name and your question?
My name's Chris Johnson, and Tousi TV I watch. I watch GB News. I watch all the news channels, but we just want the truth. That's all we want, the truth. And Tousi TV are telling the truth. And that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have a question? Question? Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Les, and this is for you, Benjamin. Benjamin, you're just like ITV and BBC. You can't give a definitive, correct answer and grow a backbone. There's nothing to you. You can't give an honest answer. When Dan's asking you, you can't go yes or no. No, shush. Don't even try and come back with anything, because this is what you do. Yeah? You need to grow a pair, yeah, and get fucking honest.
But
I think the question was, why are you a knob?
It's like Jerry Springer. But I'm afraid I actually put that back at you because sometimes the truth and what you want to hear aren't the same thing. And I'm afraid in the YouTube culture, people just want to hear what they already think. So I'd say, actually, why don't you grow a pair and accept that not everything is linear and straightforward?
No, hang on. Let me just defend this gentleman here. This gentleman's saying that people should have access to every opinion, whether that be on the left or on the right. Benjamin's saying that you should only hear what he personally approves of. And I think that is
That's not what
a
I
really
said.
bad thing.
Okay, next question. have one.
Oh, I saw this tweet.
Hello. I know you wanted it spicy, Dan. So firstly, I think you made some good points. All three of you did. Dan, I was the one that said I've got an NCTJ. That's the qualification to become a journalist.
We should trust you.
I think everyone... Well, I just want to ask, Dan, in the interest of honesty, because that's what you've been speaking about, why did I have to tell you that I've got an NCTJ? What was I trying to prove to you? What was that about?
Absolutely no idea. Why?
No, I just messaged you saying, hey, Dan, I've got an NCTJ.
No.
Why was I pushed
Oh, well,
into
you want to go into the whole thing?
Why was I pushed into a corner where, if you want to explain why that is, because you're very interested in honesty.
Yes, so you're wanting a lot of attention from this. I appreciate that. Well, I guess he's asked me the question, so I'll be honest about it. Andrew Gold messaged me earlier in the week because we were both going to be here. And I was so disgusted by his messages that I felt that I needed to post something on X that I hadn't posted for a long time, because I believe the right have been completely suckered and hoodwinked by this individual. Because what people don't know is that about 2.5 years ago, when there was the most, and I get very emotional thinking about this, but the most despicable campaign of lies against me being propagated by an organization called Byline Times, who are hard left hacking assholes of the highest order who wanted me dead, okay? They wanted me dead, that was it. And it was based on total lies. You, on your channel, every single night, without contacting me once, so by the way, you're the worst NTCJ qualified journalist.
I did ask you on the show to defend yourself. You didn't come on.
After. Andrew, you've asked me to explain.
I did ask you to come on, you didn't come on.
After you had covered it for day after day, after I had been cleared by the police. You asked me to explain.
The police didn't continue looking
Andrew,
into it.
You asked
I
me,
told you I'm an NCT journalist, so I looked into this.
You asked me to explain.
I spoke with my contacts, I did everything, I did my due diligence, and I asked you to come on.
You never asked. No. You're lying.
And then you tried to silence me. This is very important for you, Dan, because you don't like people being silenced. Now, what did you say on Twitter just a couple of days ago?
No, Andrew.
What did you say on
asked
Twitter?
me, do you want me to explain what happened? I have all
you did
of
for about 15 minutes and said nothing. Right, I want you to explain what you said on Twitter a couple of days ago for your huge audience on Twitter and YouTube. Do you want to repeat the claims you made about me?
Absolutely.
I want.
No, please.
Hang on. I want the audience to ask some questions.
He has asked me to explain. What this dude has done this week is delete a whole load of videos so that you can't see the truth about how he covered.
I deleted them
how he covered my exit from GB News.
See, he's lying again.
He said
he's
that
lying.
He said that Lawrence Fox.
This man is a liar. I can say. Well, he's lying to you because I deleted those videos 2 years ago.
The video on X.
When you said to me you would.
The video on X this week you deleted.
Oh, so one video. You said many videos.
And the video on X, by the way, just so you cannot trust this man, he is a grifter. He's turned to the right for money.
So me, Patrick, a whole list of us, aren't there?
The video on X, the video on X said that Lawrence Fox and what he said to me, what he said to me on GB News that night was a danger to society. It was a half an hour long video where he celebrated my suspension.
That was a video defending you, Dan.
No, it wasn't, Andrew.
I said you shouldn't have been fired for that. You were obviously fired for other things, Dan, weren't you?
Why did you delete it?
Because you
this
threatened
week.
legal action.
No,
Not
this
all of
week.
us have
this
the funds
week.
because I don't have the funds to defend myself.
This week. And by the way, an NTCJ journalist, the first thing they are asked to do if you're dealing with a story is you don't just believe someone who's put a whole load of lies up, you come to the person. Andrew Gold spent 3 months attacking me based on the lies of someone called Peter Jukes on Byline Times.
Dan,
it showed his true colours, what he has done is now turn to the right to grift because he thinks we are stupid.
Dan, I've let you speak.
And it was disgusting.
And by the way,
hang on a second. You were asked one question. I don't know who you are and I don't care, but you've asked your question and he's answered it. Now, fuck off.
Well, so much for free speech then, mate.
I don't know who he is.
And by the way, this week, This week, he
go that
repeated
way.
repeated more lies about me from the BBC over a court case that I am gagged on. And so do not trust this man.
I think to be fair, the audience were all
Hi
offered.
guys, I got a question for Benjamin.
They were all asked one question each, so one question.
Right, I got a question for Benjamin. I just want to go back to your statements about how absolutely, unequivocally, Tommy Robinson should never be platformed. And you said because he's dangerous and stirs up racial hatred. Yeah, your words. Based on no evidence or facts, just a slur. And you're saying, what, are we children? That we can't hear this person? That he's so dangerous? We're grown-ups. Wouldn't it be better if that was true? If that was true, what you just said, wouldn't it be better for him to be platformed? So people could hear how racist he was and how much hatred he stirs up. Because it's not true.
But the flaw, quite clearly he is platformed because that's how you know what he thinks. So many of these people who say they've been cancelled are on everything everywhere. So I don't take the argument. But secondly, by that argument, why shouldn't you have the Taliban or ISIS being able to promote their views on
Taliban. You interviewed the Taliban.
Yeah, but not in a positive way.
You interviewed the Taliban, but not Tommy Robinson. Benjamin, have you interviewed the Taliban in the past 2 years?
I have.
Have you interviewed Tommy Robinson in the past 2 years?
It was 3 years ago, but
Okay,
the point
we have time for one more question.
Well, I didn't make my
extraordinary.
But why should you give in perpetuity someone to stir up racial hatred? And that's what he does.
Come down to the guy on the end over there.
I'll be honest with you, the Taliban are a bit racist, aren't they?
But by the way, I think it's actually fine to interview the Taliban. I'm not criticizing Benjamin Butterworth for that. If Hitler were alive today, would we want to interview him? Yes. So why do you not want to interview Tommy Robinson?
Because what these people are talking about isn't interviewing, it's promoting and endorsing and praising. And that's not journalism.
So were you promoting the Taliban? Were you promoting the Taliban when you interviewed the Taliban?
By the way, you do. I just throw this out as a detail. The College of Policing have said that if you no platform people, you will get rid of their views and it will no longer be debated. I want to say to you, the Weimar Republic in 1930s Germany had exactly the same hate speech laws that Keir Starmer is introducing in Britain.
Oh, come off
and
it.
Adolf Hitler was no platform.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. We got our final question over here. Thank you.
Oh, I don't want this to end. Ever.
I do.
I'll keep this mercifully brief. As someone who worked, albeit briefly, with Tommy Robinson.
Where are we looking? Oh, hello.
Who worked briefly, albeit briefly, with Tommy Robinson on the Ellie Williams case, which is a case of a young lady who faked a grooming allegation, where he did the full fact check and then made sure he did his due diligence. I want to come back to the fact-checking side of things. We now have organizations of new media which are large enough to employ their own, essentially, fact-checking teams, and their journalists do their due diligence. So I want you to explain, Benjamin, how fact-checking from the mainstream and legacy media outlets is better or the same as independent media.
Well, I can tell you in a newspaper, contrary to popular opinion, and maybe it was different 10, 20 years ago.
I am very old.
Dan is old enough to remember.
True.
But the thing is, nowadays...
So you're old enough to remember 10 years ago. I mean, what?
It's actually really hard to get a story published in a newspaper. Now, because there is so many levels of fact-checking, of right to response, of lawyers. Now, actually, to be frank, that's one of the problems. There can be things that are blatantly true and they won't get through because of the fear of being sued. And I think there is a nature online to be far more abrasive about it, far more spontaneous.
Yeah, but hang on a second. Let's just be clear. The UK has some of the most stringent laws on libel and slander in the world. If the new media was so full of this dishonesty, why are these companies not being dragged into the High Court on a weekly basis and being sued by
And actually,
people?
there's much more risk as an independent journalist. I mean, a man called Andrew Gold threatened to sue me just this week for telling the truth.
Is that him?
Yes.
Who is that bloke?
Yes.
Sorry, tell me later.
Great. Thank you so much to our panel. Can we have a round of applause for Dan Wootton, Benjamin Butterworth, and Andre Walker?